While this is not necessarily an atheist channel, and it is a humanist channel, from time to time I will feel a need to discuss atheism within a humanist context. Some years ago I made several videos on discrimination against atheists on the now deactivated channel Keats World, so I now feel a need to revisit this topic, as a lot of time has passed since then and a lot has changed since then. The question is, has it changed enough? In many ways, discrimination against atheists occurs for many of the reasons to why members of an opposing faith are discriminated against, or arguably any other group are discriminated against. As human beings, we fear what we don't understand, and that fear manifests into hatred and disdain. Let's take homophobia, for example. Now, a homophobic person will insist, a lot of them will insist, that they don't have a fear of homosexuals. Now, while they're not running in terror as Sydney from the Scream movies runs from her serial killer, there is still a fear there. It is more of an internal insecurity form of fear. Discrimination against atheists is quite similar. I suppose you might even call it atheophobia. And yes, I do realize that word doesn't actually exist. It is a term I am coining in order to get to the heart and to understand why people are at odds with atheists or even hate atheists. A lot of atheists will live out their lives by pretty much hardly ever discussing their lack of faith one way or another, and to them atheism is only a fraction of their personhood, and that is absolutely fine, and in a lot of ways I am pretty much in the same boat. However, there are public figures such as Ricky Gervais, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, who are a lot more vocal about their lack of faith and their issues with religion and organized religion. Some might even call them militant. A religious belief, or even a loose spiritual belief, in many ways conditions the entirety of a person's worldview. To the spiritual individual, it provides many answers to why they are here, their meaning of life, their purpose in life, their morality, and it gives them hope and stability in many ways. Obviously, to many non-believers, a lot of the ways in which religion teaches these ethics is too outdated, too dogmatic, too authoritarian, and in many ways it can be very destructive to peace. This is why a lot of non-religious people question religion, or at the very least organized religion. In turn, we are questioning their very thought patterns, their perceptions of what they think the world is and what the world is all about. It is not wrong to question them, nor is it wrong to question their core beliefs. However, it is my personal choice that I don't necessarily go after a person for being religious, or criticize a person for simply being religious. If a person is trying to justify a form of discrimination, be it homophobia, sexism, racism, or they're trying to inject a religious spiritual belief into policy and politics, I will then question them, because it is those very instances that ought to be questioned. And it needs to be understood that their reasoning behind supporting what they support, to me and many others, is not a rational position, and that ought to be questioned. But the very fact that anyone is questioning faith and religion terrifies them, especially the very zealous of the bunch. The more zealous of their communities will deny that they are afraid of such inquiries. They'll even try to insist that it is actually us who should be afraid, because it is us who will be sent to eternal punishment or hell, which only further illustrates that they are in fact very afraid, and their fear is fueled by pure ignorance. They are not taking the time to try to understand that we do not share their fear tactic style of faith. This sort of fearful hate has led to the severing of romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships. There have even been cases of violence directed towards atheists over the years. While this is not as frequent in Western society, this does still occur in many Middle Eastern nations, where atheism is punished by execution. There are even some EU nations who have blasphemy laws, restricting the right of freedom of speech from atheists and those of opposing faiths. There's nothing rational about these laws. They are all based on insecurity and fear. Then of course we have discrimination that is fueled by arrogance. The Catholic Church is a fine example of this. Despite its long history of child abuse scandals, it still holds on to the ideology that it is an authority. Here in Ireland, they wish to retain their status as an authority on education. Most of our public schools, arguably all of our public schools, are also Catholic schools, which opens the window to all forms of discrimination, which results in the children of Catholic parents receiving preferential treatments and thus justifying all forms of discrimination based on religious grounds. But beside the Catholic Church, there have been many other Christian churches who have bestowed a level of arrogance, for example, claiming to have the monopoly on marriage, which has led to the very strong attack and opposition on marriage equality for so many years. The interesting thing is they don't actually have a monopoly on marriage. There is no record of marriage originated with any one religion, Christian or otherwise. It has always been founded as a human construct. There are also many cultural traditions in which a lot of religious groups are opposed to atheists celebrating, such as Christmas, for example. Too often do I hear complaints ranging from a lack of Christian imagery on Christmas cards, a lack of Christ references in Christmas carols, and disposable coffee cups not being Christmassy enough. There's a surprisingly large portion of people who are getting offended by the very idea that an atheist would celebrate Christmas at all. Granted, the holiday has a title that is connected with Christianity, but the history of the holiday is not necessarily rooted with Christianity. The holiday itself has pagan roots, as do many of its traditions contained in the holiday have pagan roots, not to mention that if Christ had existed at all, he was most certainly not born on December 25th. The holiday has evolved to be a much wider and more secular tradition, and atheists have every right to celebrate it if they wish to do so, while singing songs with no reference to Christ whatsoever, sending their loved ones Santa cards, while enjoying their gingerbread lattes from Christmasless cups. So I will leave you with this final thought. If you do in fact get something positive from a faith, power to you. However, I would encourage you not to give in to fear. Educate yourself, and the best way to do that is to ask questions. Instead of fearing the unknown, make the unknown known. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. Freedom, peace, and love.